What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to the next episode of my summer deep dive series, as we are taking an in-depth look, breaking down all 32 teams leading up to my number one ranked team in the NFL over the course of the summer. Today, we reveal the 29th ranked Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and do make sure you stick around to the end because we have an awesome guest interview with Tampa Bay Trey himself, Trevor Sikkema of PFF. Coming on to wrap up the deep dive today. Going to be a very unique team to take a look at, a team that is kind of trying to bridge out of the Tom Brady Super Bowl era into whatever this new regime is going to look like. So very much looking forward to it. Before we do get started, a ton goes into this series. This is all I have time for this summer. So it's really important to me that this video, this series continues to do well. And if you could take just a second to hit that like button down below, I really appreciate it. It goes further than you know, and it takes just a second. It's a free and easy way to support my channel. Make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss any of these deep dives as we lead up to the number one team throughout the course of the summer. But let's go ahead and get into it, starting off by recapping this team's key additions and subtractions. A lot of departures for this Bucs team. Of course, Tom Brady is going to be out the door. But beyond that, this team losing a lot of key starters and role players from the Tampa Bay era. Leonard Fournette, their starting running back. Donovan Smith, their left tackle. Shaq Mason, who was brought in right guard last season. William Golston, who's been just such a staple as that 4-eye in their base fronts. Akeem Hicks, who was brought in last year, ate up about half of the available snaps at the defensive tackle position. A big one here, Sean Murphy-Bunting. Though he only played 497 snaps last year and has had a hard time staying healthy, he is going to open up some question marks at corner, as we'll see later when we get into the roster portion of the video. Beyond that, Mike Edwards, a starting safety, and additionally some less concerning departures. Byron Leftwich is going to be seen out the door. I was optimistic for what Byron Leftwich was going to do last year, but let's be honest, it was a train wreck in terms of play calling last season. So hopefully upgrading with Dave Canales, who we will discuss shortly. But some other players, Cameron Brate, who had less snaps than I expected last year, 376. Julio Jones at 392. He's definitely washed at this point. Rakeem Nunez-Roches, as I was reviewing the film for this team, he actually stood out to me to the point that I almost put him in key departures. He was actually really good for this team last year. He's going to head to the New York Giants. Keanu Neal, who ate up good rotational snaps as a safety, along with Logan Ryan. So they have about half of their team snaps, more or less, that are going to need to be replaced this year, going with a lot of new faces. Some of those big new additions, of course, the offensive coordinator, as we described, but at quarterback, Baker Mayfield is going to step in as the presumed starter. They do get Ryan Jensen back, who only played in that wild card playoff game last year, kind of forced his return. Wasn't very good in that game, but did get back. But yeah, he missed the entire regular season. Good to get him back, certainly. Matt Filer is brought over from the LA Chargers, along with Cody Mock in the second round. So three kind of new offensive linemen, if you will, compared to last year's team. And then Kalijah Cansey, as you flip over to the defensive side of the ball, brought in to up this pass rush, which is much needed. This was one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL last year, along with Greg Gaines, another guy that, as I was reviewing film for the Rams, really stood out to me. Excited to talk about him as we get to the defense and the roster breakdown, along with Yaya Diaby, an athletic edge rusher in the third round, and Ryan Neal, who is slated to be a starter for this team. So some pretty nice additions for this team, despite the fact that they're in sort of a transition season, if you will. Some smaller additions as well, most notably in day 3 of the draft, where they had a handful of 5th and 6th round picks there, but they do also bring in Chase Edmonds to provide some extra relief in that running back room. And I will say, before we get off of this portion of the episode here, is this team had a notable amount of undrafted pickups that I really liked. So for all of those people craving undrafted free agent analysis, you're going to get a lot of it here in this Bucs deep dive. But let's move on and discuss the coach and scheme in Tampa Bay for 2023. And starting things off with Todd Bowles, who is the defensive coordinator on top of Casey Rogers and Larry Foote. No change on that front this season, though they did change offensive coordinators. And I'm sorry, Bucs fans, but I'm going to rank Todd Bowles 30th in the NFL among head coaches. And I know some Bucs fans that actually would agree with that. I'm curious, Bucs fans, what do you think about ranking him so low? But I like Todd Bowles as a defensive mind, but I do think he is now lumped in with some of these defensive coordinators we've seen, maybe guys like Vic Fangio and Dan Quinn, where if they're allowed to just orchestrate the defense and focus on that, they're really freaking good at it. But you make them a head coach, and they just aren't necessarily... I don't want to say he's not cut out for it, but he doesn't stack up against the great coaches in the league in terms of having a team with a vision and getting everybody on the same page. And I think it also can be a detractor from being able to put the time into the X's and O's on the defensive side of the ball. And I think it did at times hurt their defensive coaching last year. I didn't feel like they were scheming up as much, phantom pressure off of outstanding blitz looks and utilizing their personnel in the best possible way. It wasn't horrible, but for example, I would rank them in the tier 2 as being a greatly coached defensive unit if it was just Todd Bowles as a defensive coordinator. But I do think it's a slight detractor to bring him down just a slight tier there. Still very good defensive coaching, but I definitely have my questions on if he's going to last here, if this team season obviously goes as I'm expecting them to be one of the 5 worst teams in the NFL next year, ranking them 29th coming into the year. He's definitely on the hot seat. I think you need to see this defense really carry, and maybe even to the point where this team wins this poor NFC South division. As far as what his scheme is going to look like with Casey Rogers and Larry Foote, who have been with Todd Bowles really throughout their careers, this is a aggressive 3-4 defense. They love to blitz. They love to stunt and run games up front. They're going to go man-to-man on the back end while mixing in an appropriate amount of zones, just as most blitz-heavy teams will do. But the Bucs are one of few teams remaining that really are not afraid to get into their base defense looks. With 7 men at the line of scrimmage, this has been a remarkable run defense really since Todd Bowles got here with Bruce Arians. And as far as the run defense, as we'll see later, the way they scheme it up and the way that they are not afraid to put a bunch of guys in the box, that's not going to change. Now, occasionally that can hurt them on the back end if they get coverage busts and they don't have enough guys on the back end. But for the most part, they do a really good job matching their coverages and putting good defensive backs out there in spots where they can succeed. So, I'm not trying to shred Todd Bowles, but I think what we saw last year is he's not one of the premium head coaches in the NFL after getting promoted from defensive coordinator here in Tampa. A lot to prove, really, that he's the right guy for this. I don't want to call it a rebuild, but for this transition. Now, I am a big fan of this offensive coordinator hire. Like I said, it just did not work out with Byron Leftwich. And sure, there was probably some clashing of opinions between what Tom Brady wanted to do and what Leftwich wanted to do. But I think the Bucs were right there with maybe even the worst called offense in the NFL last year. So it was definitely due for some turnover here. And they're going to bring in Dave Canales from Seattle, who notably did a remarkable job working as the quarterback coach for Geno Smith. And he's a guy that's been in Seattle since 2011, so it reminds me a little bit of like a young Kevin Stefanski, where he was just hanging out as a position coach forever and got to really learn from a variety of different offensive coordinators. Learn from Darrell Bevell, who had his run in Seattle there, Brian Schottenheimer, and then most recently Shane Waldron, where it's definitely presumed that Canales is going to be next in line around the NFL to implement this Shanahan-style wide zone, play action heavy, deep shot passing game and run scheme. It's the 4th deep dive that we've done now, and this is the 4th straight team that is going to be running a Shanahan-style scheme. And there's a reason that teams rebuilding, or I mean, it's not just rebuilding teams, just teams around the league love this scheme because it simplifies everything. Everything looks the same. For the quarterback, you have less reads to make. It helps buy more time because it keeps defenses guessing whether it's run or pass. You create these moving pockets. It's a proven scheme around the league, and more often than not, these style coordinators work when they go to new places. It's not foolproof, but for the most part, this is good process by the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, is he young? Yeah, he's 37 years old. Is he unproven as a play caller? Absolutely, but I am optimistic that he can come in with these receivers and with Baker Mayfield and accomplish something nice here. And I'm excited to talk too, like this is a team going from very much a downhill, gap-heavy run scheme, because with Tom Brady at quarterback, you can't really create a ton of moving pockets and run a lot of play-action boots, right? So they had their Shaq Masons and Donovan Smiths and even a guy like Tristan Wirfs. You know, this was a downhill. Leonard Fournette was their freaking running back. Like, that's all you need to know there. This was a downhill power gap scheme, now making a complete U-turn to being a wide zone blocking scheme. So there's going to be some different scheme fits. Some players it will benefit, and some players it's going to hurt. So it's going to be interesting to take a look at what this is going to mean for a lot of these players throughout this video. I can't rank Dave Canales too high just because he is new. I'm optimistic. I think the passing designs specifically should be pretty good here. Whereas the run game, you know, it's something I talked about in our last deep dive with the Rams. You know, the Sean McVay variants of the Shanahan offense, which Canales ran under Shane Waldron. I've never felt like those run games are uniquely designed or bring a whole lot to the table. When it comes to like mixing in pin and pull and trap runs and really keeping defenses on their feet. It's more just, yeah, we're going to run wide zone when we run the ball. You better be ready for it, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But you pair that with an existing offensive staff really that could not get this run game going for the life of them last year. And I think there are legitimate questions on how good the run game design can be here. But pass game coaching should start as fine, and you can feel pretty optimistic moving forward. And then to wrap up the coaching and scheme and culture and all this, I do have that overall coach and culture ranking, which basically acts as a benefit of the doubt multiplier. And I think the Bucs are kind of in between right now. They have a lot of leadership carryover from those Super Bowl winning teams, which is, of course, going to inspire confidence that they can beat anybody, but they have lost a lot of players. Tom Brady is out the building. I do have questions about how much this team truly believes in Todd Bowles in the long run. So I'm not going to say it's a problem, but I don't look at the Bucs and say, yeah, this unit should get a lot of benefit of the doubt, whereas I kind of did with the Rams with Sean McVay kind of overseeing things, just as an example. But next we're going to break down this roster. But before we do that, I got to tell you about my good friends at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is truly changing the game when it comes to fantasy football in two different ways. Number one is going to be best ball fantasy. Hey, what's the best part of fantasy football? It's draft day, right? You get together with your friends, you think about all day who you're going to pick, and then you just sit there all night staring at your new roster all night because you're so happy with it. Well, you can have draft day right now through Best Ball Fantasy. You can compete in Best Ball Mania 4, the biggest fantasy football competition literally of all time, and it is draft, set it, and forget it. No daily moves, no waiver wires, no trades. It's all about the draft. You can compete for huge winnings. I have loved doing Best Ball Fantasy. And on top of that, you can play daily pick'em contests and Underdog as well. And this is not just for the NFL. I've been playing this for every MLB game that I go to. You set your lineups anywhere from 2 to 5 picks, picking props, things like fantasy points, home runs, passing yards, points in basketball as we look at the NBA Finals coming up here. And again, massive payouts up to 20-1. So small entries with massive rewards that massively increase your interest in any given sporting event. I cannot swear by Underdog Fantasy anymore. And right now, if you sign up using promo code TFG, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit, and you'll support my channel in a big way in the process. So that's promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy. So let's kick off the roster breakdown by breaking down the passing game and, of course, starting with the quarterback room, where really this team's season, in my opinion, is going to come and go based on what type of Baker Mayfield they can get. And I don't know who fell off faster, the Tampa Bay Bucks, who were my number one ranked team going into last year, along with a lot of people's number one ranked team last year, or Baker Mayfield, who really heading into 2021 was viewed as a top half quarterback in the league, a former number one overall draft pick, who was working his way through, like building his way up to a massive contract extension and had the Browns in the playoffs the year before. And that 2021 season just completely was a worst case. Everything went to shit, nightmare scenario. The team was worse, Baker was worse, and then on top of that, he suffers a career-altering shoulder injury that he either wanted to play through or the Browns kind of forced him to play through. It got murky there. But if any quarterback you watch and say their game is very much predicated on confidence and swagger, Baker Mayfield was that guy, right? He kind of has that gunslinger mentality, his moxie in the pocket. It all went away when he played through that shoulder injury and wasn't playing well. I don't think it helped either that the Browns so quickly gave up on him in favor of a sexual predator that couldn't play the next year, right? He gets traded to Carolina for a bag of peanuts, and he was a different player. He was timid and almost scared in the pocket. I don't think his arm talent took a huge hit, but I think maybe not quite what it was in Cleveland, where initially I had to kind of eat my own words. I didn't think his arm talent was all that special coming out of Oklahoma, but in his first couple years in Cleveland, he showed that he genuinely has one of the maybe 6 to 8 strongest arms in the NFL. It really is true. He never has gotten, well, some people will give him credit for that, but mass media and maybe social media might not always give him credit for how strong his arm truly is. I still think it's very good, but overall, his confidence to get through his progressions, to stand tall in the pocket, to read the defense, it just all fell apart. And I think in Carolina as well, it was much more of a spread style offense. He had become very used to running wide zone, Shanahan style stuff in Cleveland, and that transition wasn't necessarily smooth. And it just didn't work out in Carolina to the point where they freaking released him in the 1 year that they had acquired him. However, the Rams, saving grace, come and pick him up. And on short notice, literally like 48 hours to get ready with the new team, he is in there, not necessarily starting, because I think Walford was in there for like the first 2 drives, but wasn't working. They put in Baker Mayfield in that Thursday night game against the Raiders, and he balled out. It was genuinely one of the happiest, most pleasantly surprising moments of the 2022 NFL season. He gets back into a Shanahan-style wide zone, play-action shot, heavy offense. Looked more comfortable than he did in Carolina, even though he didn't even really know the playbook. I mean, the concepts are similar for sure. But he leads a game-winning drive in that game against the Raiders, holds on to the starting job the rest of the year, and it's that brief run that earned him his final chance here in Tampa Bay. Now, after the Raiders game, he dipped back down. It was a really difficult situation, poor offensive line. Cooper Kupp wasn't in the lineup. I think Allen Robinson was even hurt at that point. So it's just like, it was going to be very difficult for him to have success, for any quarterback to have success on that Rams team based on what they were at the end of last season. I mean, we just ranked them 31st in the NFL for a reason. But fast forward now to Tampa, where he obviously is going to not just a system that he's going to be familiar with, because you have Dave Canales, who learned from Shane Waldron, who learned from Sean McVay. It's going to be all the same terminology and a lot of the same plays. And as far as the scheme goes, like Baker has shown, he has that arm talent and ability to push the ball downfield, to get out on play action boots and throw on the move and really, run a Shanahan-style offense. He was really freaking good at it in 2020 for the Browns. But additionally, you pair him with the quarterback coach in Dave Canales, who resurrected Geno Smith's career. And I'd be lying if I said Baker Mayfield becoming a good quarterback again as the former number 1 overall pick would be more surprising than Geno Smith at like 31 years old or 32, whatever he is, coming out of nowhere and turning into a good quarterback. So it's going to be fun to see. I've kind of come around on Baker Mayfield. I wasn't a big fan of him coming out of college, but I do like his moxie and I do pull for him. I think he got a bad beat in Cleveland. And this is the first time in a couple years where a team actually believes in him. He's going to have that opportunity for the course of the offseason from OTAs all the way through to, get familiar with the team, the scheme, and try to hit the ground running and build up his momentum again. I don't think it's impossible that it happens, but man, he has had a lot of ugly tape in the last 2 years of football, and to count on that is certainly not something that has a high probability of success. They are going to rank 28th in the NFL at quarterback. There are teams in slightly worse situations, or at least even more unproven situations heading into the league, but that's obviously not ideal. And then as far as Kyle Trask, yes, I am talking as though Baker is the presumed week 1 starter. There might be a small fraction of Bucs fans that were also Florida Gators fans that believe Kyle Trask is the future, was a second-round pick, was never a pick that I saw a whole lot of value in. I thought he made sense as a potential backup for a really talented team that was still in their Super Bowl window. But for me, Kyle Trask, going back to Florida, was literally just Nick Foles. Decent at reading the field, good accuracy, but overall lacks athleticism and arm talent. And just like Nick Foles, Kyle Trask is a guy that on 3rd and 6, he's not going to really improvise or create a whole lot or navigate the pocket and buy a ton of time. He's going to put it out there and give his receiver a chance, which is going to lead to a very high variance level of play where, some weeks, I will say it's good to have guys like Mike Evans in here if you're going to be a quarterback like that. But, that was his Kyle Pitts at Florida, and that worked out pretty damn well against college competition. But, some weeks, those 50-50 balls might come down 5 for 7 in your favor. Other weeks, they're going to come down 2 for 7, and 2 of them are going to get tipped up in the air, deflected, and intercepted, right? So, that's who he is. First, second down, he can run the offense. Third down, it's entirely contingent on the pass protection and the receivers winning. And that's just not a long-term sustainable starter. Does he have some things to like as a potential quality backup? Certainly. If everything is horrible with Baker Mayfield and he can't get that confidence, I think Kyle Trask can steer this Buccaneers ship towards drafting a quarterback next year. But are there really any worlds where I can personally see him becoming a starter for this team heading into 2024? No, I'd be lying if I felt that way. He could certainly prove me wrong, but I don't see it there. They also do bring in John Wolford. If you need any more evidence that they want to run Sean McVay's offense, there you go. Wolford was there. He's had some decent starts. He even went into Seattle and beat Dave Canales' Seahawks in 2021 in a surprising upset. But you're in a bad way if you're getting to John Wolford for this team season, and maybe that is best case scenario because you might be thinking about Caleb Williams in that situation. But again, 28th at quarterback. Now, they are going to rank much better as we get to the group of weaponry here. They're going to rank 16th in the NFL, smack dab in the middle, which might sound low considering they do have one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But I do think there's a slight lack of diversity of skill sets here and honestly just overall explosiveness. Like the one receiver here that you would argue, or at least among starters, that you would argue is an explosive matchup problem is Chris Godwin. But, even going back to last year, coming off the ACL, he wasn't able to really show deep threat ability in that Bucs offense that didn't have a whole lot of deep threat potential because of everything going on. But beyond him, you got Mike Evans, who's your prototype still, your prototype X wide receiver. I think T. Higgins is coming for the crown as far as best true X wide receiver, as far as being that big bodied target on the outside, a guy that can stack and win vertically on deep fades, but also keep corners honest with comebackers, hitches, slants into the middle of the field, dig routes. That's Mike Evans. And the biggest thing with Mike Evans, or the biggest knock on Mike Evans, is he's not this amazing separator, really beyond just running go balls on the outside. He can do some crafty stuff from the slot from time to time that he doesn't always get credit for, but when you talk about a Shanahan-style offense, you're talking about run in a straight crossing route for 25-plus yards and pull away from the trailing corner. And that's not really Mike Evans' game, honestly. So as far as first and second down work, I am interested to see, does he see a dip in production? Does this potentially lead to the first year he doesn't have 1,000 yards? I mean, that's what he's known for. Is I don't think he's had a year in his career without surpassing 1,000. If he did, he had like a 998 year or something like that. But it is a clash of skill set and scheme. He's really been in more of these pro-style spread offenses where he can always work as that X on the outside. Again, sometimes being mixed into the slot, but it is something just to keep an eye on. Now, Chris Godwin in this scheme might see a bump, especially if he can get back to full, like his pre-ACL injury speed. Chris Godwin, physically speaking, I would compare to Deebo Samuel, maybe a little bit of Cooper Kupp as well, who both those guys thrive in these Shanahan-style schemes. Deebo Samuel especially. Go back to what I just said about crossing routes. I mean, Chris Godwin, in theory, in this offense, should see a lot more depth in his target share. And I would not be the least bit surprised if he outproduces Mike Evans, at least in total yards. Godwin's also a freak after the catch. These schemes really set these guys up well, if the quarterback can be accurate, as far as leading these guys upfield and putting them in situations where true rack threats can thrive. Deebo Samuel is the premium example, but Godwin, man, he's 6'1", he's 210, he runs like a running back, he has speed. Maybe not quite that Deebo has, but it's comparable. I think he's a better route runner and a better ball winner than Deebo is, though. So, like, you know, I think as far as the scheme change goes, it's going to maybe hurt Evans a little bit, but benefit Chris Godwin. The other nice thing about Godwin is he's one of the best run-blocking receivers in the entire NFL. And you look at these systems, what they did with Cooper Kupp for the Rams, where he's that guy who's doing that down block on play action to make sure that defensive end can't chase, and then he's going to sneak out on that crosser or even get lost on like Y leak. Like, they are going to really be able to tap into Chris Godwin's skill set if he's healthy and if they're smart about it. So while he had a down year last year, I'm going to hesitantly put an up arrow next to Chris Godwin here, because I think from a scheme fit perspective, he makes a ton of sense to have success in this offense, and I'm excited to see him. So you want to talk about best ball, underdog, all that stuff. Chris Godwin very much could be a guy to target for you. And then you got Russell Gage, who's a very solid, standard third wide receiver. Really not a ton of excitement about him. He definitely didn't thrive last year, but in 2021, he was really good for the Falcons. He was their leading receiver, or at least wide receiver. I think Pitts ended up with more yards, but Gage really has shown throughout his time as, I think he was a 6th round pick. He might have even been undrafted out of LSU, but he's shown that he can line up anywhere, outside, inside, decent route runner, decent hands, decent after the catch, decent size, a true jack of all trades, master of none type. And as a third wide receiver, you're certainly not going to complain about it. But beyond him, the Bucs might have the thinnest group of receivers in the NFL right now. They have Trey Palmer, who was a 5th round pick out of Nebraska, a true deep threat with a lot of potential, was arguably the fastest receiver in this draft class, was a highly recruited player that went to LSU, ended up at Nebraska. God-awful hands. I mean, he is your Marquez Valdez-Scantling comparison, or your Quez Watkins comparison, as the guy that comes in with vertical speed, a guy that showed he could separate at the college level, but can he improve his deep ball tracking ability and prove that he can catch the ball when he's open? That's going to be the biggest thing, but also just like he's not a super versatile receiver as far as running a full route tree or winning in the short game, so you know what he is. It's just, can he solidify those hands? You bring in David Moore, who's going to fill a similar role. Like, they clearly were looking for a deep threat. As I mentioned earlier, like, they don't really have that true vertical separator here. Even Chris Godwin hasn't necessarily been that guy. But Trey Palmer, David Moore, Raheem Jarrett, these guys all have vertical speed and field stretching ability. David Moore is more of that veteran, cheap pickup that if Palmer doesn't look good to you, you can turn to David Moore when you want to scheme up those deep shots. But Raheem Jarrett as an undrafted pickup made no sense to me. I had him as maybe a fourth-round guy, even a late third-round guy. He's 21 years old, really athletic guy. It just didn't work out at Maryland, who couldn't get him going. And I'm not going to act like he was the perfect receiver. Like, when it comes to the physical aspects of the position, he was brutal. Anytime he got touched down the field, was bumped off his routes, a horrid contested catch ball winner. I think he was at like 17%. But the kid can separate. And when you watch him run routes, you can absolutely see that 5-star athletic ability that's in there. So that should not, to me, fall undrafted. Like 6th round, sure. But I think getting him in a situation where they need explosiveness and they don't have a lot of go-to options as far as like athletic guys, like really good separator types, maybe not in year one, but he was one of my favorite undrafted pickups where I looked at it and was like, ooh, that's a really good fit. So I like that quite a bit. I think those are probably your 6. Devin Tompkins made the team last year. We'll see if he can repeat that along with Kalen Geiger, who I think got 1 target last year. But I'm expecting those top 6 to be your receivers. Then you flip over to the tight end position, and it's not good. Like, Cade Otton started a lot of snaps last year. I think he was a balanced tight end coming into the league and certainly should be better as he gets older. You know, tight end is just a position that always takes time. I never saw Cade Otton as some super high upside guy. I don't think the NFL did either. You know, he fell to the mid rounds for a reason. My pro comp for him, ironically, was Cameron Brate. And I think at some point he'll settle in as what Cam Brate was. Decent, but not great blocker. Typical possession receiver, possession tight end who can win on stick routes and be a decent red zone threat. But I just don't see a whole lot more from Cade Otton than that. There's so many of these possession, 6'5", 250-pound possession white tight ends that just, they are what they are. And you don't really need to spend a ton of time on them. Cade Otton could surprise, but he certainly didn't show the flashes to be some dynamic threat in his rookie season. You got Keeft, who's a blocker out of Minnesota, not a receiving threat, and Durham Payne is a 5th-round pick who's got really strong hands and is a crafty tight end, but definitely not, a huge separator or dynamic run-after-catch threat. I think he could eventually beat out Cade Otton, but for now, it's Cade Otton's tight end room. It's going to be, they're really going to be there to block and convert on 3rd and short. We'll see if David Wells and Dominique the Daphne can make the team. Daphne is more of that athletic wing player, so I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it for certain formational, lead block setup type deals. I do like what they have in the receiving game from these running backs. Rachaad White was incredible at Arizona State in the receiving game and really stepped in as a rookie, and it's often hard for rookie running backs to step in and be effective in the receiving game right away, and especially with Tom Brady, who's all about timing and being at the right place at the right time. And Rachaad White accomplished that. Sure-handed dude, actually runs really good routes. He's kind of built like a receiver. He's like 6 foot 210-ish, which is, kind of receiver-esque build. I think that's exactly what Deebo Samuel is. He's not Deebo as an athlete, but he is a good athlete. He's elusive after the catch and transitions well. I think you're very optimistic that he's going to be a good threat out of the backfield at least, but he really does have potential to be, I would say, a top 10 receiving back in the NFL. And if anyone is going to break out here, I think that might be him. They also bring in Chase Edmonds, who was kind of strangely thrown around the league last year. He signs with Miami. They ship him off to Denver. They didn't really use him all that much. Just a year ago, he was a really talented scat back for the Arizona Cardinals. And I think in that role, he can be that player again if he can get that confidence and juice back. Kind of a nice why not pickup. But beyond that, they got Keyshawn Vaughn, who I've never been a Keyshawn Vaughn guy. I would like to see them move on from him. And Patrick Laird, whatever, he's caught some balls for Miami, but Sean Tucker gets picked up from Syracuse, and Ronnie Brown out of Shepherd, two really fun undrafted pickups. Sean Tucker was supposed to be drafted, but had a rough pre-draft process. He was injured for part of it, and then he had one of those kind of like Jalen Reagor self-workout things. I think he really rubbed teams the wrong way because he didn't perform at the combine, didn't perform at his pro day, but then he did his own private workout within the week, and the numbers were, it was like, oh, I ran a 4.32. It's like, no, you fucking didn't, Sean Tucker. You did not run a 4.32. Come to the pro day, respect the process, and just run a 4.5. Like, we don't care. We know you're not fast. Just don't lie to us and, try to, cheese the process. So I do think there's something about the way he handled it that led to him being undrafted. But his film as a 21-year-old coming out of Syracuse, definitely worthy of being a day 3 pick. He's that contact balance style. He's got good vision. I do think he has smooth hands out of the backfield. We're kind of jumping the gun a little bit, talking about the running back room. It's always tough to know how to order these conversations, but he should make the team. He's definitely someone I'm targeting in Dynasty. I think I just took him in the 4th round of one of my Dynasty rookie drafts. If Rachaad White doesn't take a step up, I will not be the least bit surprised if Sean Tucker has that sort of James Robinson-esque. That's pretty high standards, but basically being a good starting running back as an undrafted pickup. And then Ronnie Brown had a Shepherd. This dude was ultra productive. I think he had I want to say off the top of my head, I think he had almost 4,000 yards over his last 2 years at Shepherd. And he tested unbelievably well. On paper, one of the most athletic running backs in this entire class. So if he makes this team and if those skills can translate to the next level, there might be something there in Ronnie Brown. So we'll see if he makes the team, and certainly could be a nice scat back option with potential there. So it's a fun group of weapons. I'm excited to see how Chris Godwin is implemented with this new scheme. They're trying to find some dynamism with some of these, low-level pickups, guys like Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, and we'll see if they can hit on some of those guys. But 16th, look, there's a lot of great groups of weapons in the league with even more dynamism and explosiveness and depth than the Bucs have. But it's definitely not going to be what holds this team back either. It's going to be more the other way around, where they have a good group of receivers here to help this team do what they want to do in the passing game. Now, you go to the offensive line, and other than Baker Mayfield, this is the biggest high variance pivot factor for this Bucs team. They're going to rank 25th in pass protection and 20th in run blocking, but they actually have really good potential, very much based on the 2 young players on the right side of the line. Now, what you do like is you've got some veterans that you can hang your hat on, starting with Tristan Wirfs at left tackle. Now, look, I would never, Tristan Wirfs, who's been a top 3 right tackle since the second he got drafted, I would never project regression for Tristan Wirfs. But there are 3 things with this 2023 Bucs team that I'm looking for, that I'm curious about with Tristan Wirfs, because it's very fascinating to me, that could potentially lead to regression for him. Number 1 is he's going from right to left. Not every player can make this transition. He even just said in a press conference recently that it was like learning to walk for the first time. There's a famous quote from, was it Mitchell Schwartz or some Marshall Yanda maybe? I don't know, someone like that who was a longtime Pro Bowl guard. He was like, switching sides is like learning how to wipe with your other hand. It's just not something that always translates. So I'm curious to see on a face value, does he play as well at left as he did at right? He was a right tackle at Iowa as well. Certainly when I played offensive line, I much preferred to play on the right. But the other things here is he no longer has Tom Brady, who is, to say he is an offensive lineman's best friend is selling what Tom Brady was capable of short. Not only did Tom Brady have elite pocket presence to navigate pressure and set up angles for offensive linemen, stepping up and stepping left and drifting to the right spots in the pocket that helped offensive linemen win their blocks, but year after year after year, Tom Brady was top in the league in time to throw, or shortest in time to throw. So the ball's getting out. They didn't have to block as long. They weren't left vulnerable very long. So that helped everybody on this offensive line. It helped Donovan Smith, and it certainly helped Tristan Wirfs. So I'm curious to see how he can block for Baker Mayfield, who doesn't have the best pocket presence and does want to hold on to the ball a little bit longer. And then the last thing is here, from a run block perspective, how well does he fit in a wide zone scheme as opposed to a gap scheme? You know, Tristan Wirfs plays at 345, 350 pounds. He is a huge dude. But when you watch him play, despite how athletic he tested at the combine, he really doesn't move at an elite level on film. He can move pretty well for a 350-pound offensive tackle, but again, that's at 350 pounds. You know, they're going to ask him to reach wide nine techniques to climb to the second level, and I don't know if he's shown that he's amazing at that. He's certainly capable of it, and I'm not going to bet against him there. But I would love to see Tristan Wirfs drop about 25 pounds, get down to the 325 he played at Iowa, where he did have an unbelievable combine, where he did move much better at Iowa than I have seen from him at Tampa Bay. And I think it'd be better long-term. You know, he's started to get some injuries. He's been banged up. I think it'd be better for his bones and long-term as well. So I'm very curious if that's something on the Bucs' radar, is to have him shed a little bit of weight to be a scheme fit and to be better for his long-term health. But again, I'm not betting against Tristan Wirfs. He's been a top 3 right tackle, and I would expect that he's going to be a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. He's a brick shithouse who you cannot run through. His anchor is as good as any tackle in the league. He's got good foot speed for a guy that big. I mean, he is just other than the games where he's been injured, like dealing with ankle injuries and stuff over the last couple of years, he's been pretty much a stonewall as a pass protector. And he's been a good run blocker. You know, some of that mobility stuff does show up when you watch him play. He doesn't always sustain blocks, but I'm not going to really knock him on his run blocking either. I just don't think he's the elite run blocker that he is in pass protection. Now, as you go from left to right, you got projected to start at left guard is Matt Filer, though I don't think that's a lock. Filer had his lumps for the Chargers, and another guy where this is a system that's going to really ask these guys to be athletes, to move block, not just in the run game, but off of play action, these resetting pockets. And Filer is more of a bruiser at guard. I don't think he's a horrible athlete, but he's been in more head-up blocking schemes in Pittsburgh and LA. So it's going to be something new for him, whereas I think you have much better athletes in Robert Hainsey and Nick Leverett, who started for this team last year and honestly played at comparable levels to what Filer was for the Chargers last year. So I do think Filer's a better people mover than those other two guys, and Hainsey was at center as Ryan Jensen was injured. I think between the three of them, however, you are going to get competent left guard play, at least in pass protection, but none of them are lockdown or superstars. And I think having that depth is nice because we are going to have some questions about right guard, as we're going to get to in just a second. So if mid-season things are a disaster here, you can slide in Hainsey or Leverett or kick Filer to right guard or something like that. But then you got Ryan Jensen getting up there in age and coming off the injury. And as I said, when he came back, he really struggled in that playoff game. Granted, it was against the best pass rush in the NFL and the Dallas Cowboys, and he was rushing back. So I'm not going to hold that against him. But at his age, for a guy that really has never been a dominant pass protector, he's much more been known for his tenacity in the run game. You know, I think regression is certainly expected for Ryan Jensen. That's why he's going to get the down arrow here. It's not just the injury, it's that we've already seen regression. He is heading in the wrong direction, and I don't think it's a good scheme fit. He has been a great power gap scheme blocker. He is extremely strong. He can down block and flush guys out. He can get on the move, and you know, he's not this amazing athlete, but he has a great targeting system when they did pull him on wide power and that kind of stuff. But as far as reaching a two technique or resetting the pocket at center, I don't know that he's going to hold up all that well at his age for a guy that's already not a great athlete. So he's still a really good player, and his tenacity and leadership and ability to call protections on the inside is definitely still better than having Robert Hainsey. But don't be surprised if he's more of just a guy this year in this system. But then let's get to the right side of the line. And, I do think they have options if this remains this big of a disaster. But certainly to start the year, you're going to have some hiccups. I think you can kick Matt Filer to right tackle and play Hainsey and Leverett at guard if both these guys are as bad as I'm currently ranking them. And the reality is I just can't rank these guys all that high. Luke Goedeke was, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and Bucs fans will agree with me, he was fucking terrible in his rookie season. And I liked Luke Goedeke, but they had to get him off the field. He did play much better in his final game of the season after getting benched. So hopefully that's, not an anomaly and a trend. But when he had to play guard, he could not handle the play strength of NFL defensive linemen. And that's why they're kicking him back out to tackle. It's what he played at Central Michigan. But he has everything to prove at right tackle. And I think the wide zone blocking scheme will certainly help him, whereas it might hurt Ryan Jensen or a 350-pound Tristan Wirfs. Goedeke can absolutely reach a wide technique. He can climb to block a linebacker at the next level. So I certainly expect gains at least as a run blocker, where he was even bad in a gap-heavy scheme last year. So again, I can't rank him too high coming into the year. But in pass protection, he has got to prove what he can do there, because it was a nightmare what he showed this Bucs team last year. He was a core reason why they were so disappointing as a team. They spent a second-round pick on him, and he was one of the worst starting linemen in the NFL. Then you have Cody Mock, who I have similar concerns about sliding back inside. I honestly believe if Cody Mock didn't have long red hair and was, from North Dakota State and missing his two front teeth and just had this aesthetic about him, there's no way he's a second-round pick, dude. Even his tape at North Dakota State wasn't that good, at least in pass protection. Like, sure, he's a great athlete, and I get that. But you got to be strong to play offensive lineman at the NFL level. And I don't think he has great play strength. I really don't. I don't think he moved people all that well. I thought when he had to deal with bull rushers, he got overwhelmed. He really struggled at the Senior Bowl, sliding him into guard. And I get the athletic potential. And that's why I said, sure, late third round, sure, you can give me Cody Mock. But they took Cody Mock over John Michael Schmitz, over Osiris Torrance. And I honestly just cannot endorse that. I understand the scheme fit is better with Cody Mock and sure, whatever. But John Michael Schmitz was an unreal wide zone blocker at Minnesota. I don't care if he didn't run in the fours for his 40 time. So we'll see. I would love to be wrong. I mean, just look at that picture. How great would it be if this guy was a Pro Bowl guard? Because that would just be good for the NFL. He just looks like an NFL offensive lineman. But again, I don't think his tape and his play strength matched that. I think he'll be good as a run blocker here, similar to a Matt Hennessy for the Falcons, where you're running this system. You're that good of an athlete. You're going to have some good blocks, reaching guys and moving the wave, if you will. But in pass protection, Matt Hennessy has been nothing short of a liability, and I'd be very much worried about that with Cody Mock. So Baker Mayfield, who likes to drift to the right, is going to have the worst right side pass protection in the offense in the NFL. That is a literal recipe for complete disaster. As far as any other depth is concerned, we already covered Hainsey and Leverett. Brandon Walton played okay last year. Again, how much of that is Tom Brady, who always elevates his tackles? Walton very much an out of nowhere developmental type of guy that you might have something, maybe a decent swingman. Justin School as well was here in Tampa last year, had some successful starts early in his career for the 49ers in that wide zone blocking scheme. So, he's never been a great pass protector, but could move some people if you have some injuries at tackle. Aaron Stinney has played a little bit in the NFL. John Molchan started a game last year for the Bucs and graded out really well in pass protection. I did not watch him in that game, so take that as you will. There's worse depth around the league, especially with those interior guys. You have a couple guys that can not be turnstiles in pass protection, but overall, it's offensive line depth in the NFL. I will mention quickly the key skill blockers here. You wish with Cade Otton, you wish he was a little bit stronger. Maybe he can beef up in the weight room as your primary tight end. It's going to be something to monitor this year. But on top of that, you got Kokeeft, who is a blocking specialist. I think he'll accomplish some good stuff in this run game. I talked earlier about Chris Godwin being that down blocker, kind of from the wing with his size, could be really good at that. Mike Evans blocking on the outside is good, and Russell Gage has been a pretty good blocker as well. So for what it's worth, the receivers are really good run blockers here in Tampa, which these Shanahan-style systems always place a priority on. And then we wrap up the offensive skill position groups with the running back. And I'm sorry, Bucs fans, but somebody's got to rank 32nd in this NFL where everybody's got running backs. Guys like Damian Harris, who are quality starting running backs, are getting paid $1.5 million to be rotational players. The Bucs choose not to go that route for a veteran. Well, they bring in Chase Edmonds, but they don't bring in like an established starting type. And they're going to kind of stand by Rachaad White, who I do believe in. I think he's a capable back. I think he's a starting caliber back even though he split reps with Leonard Fournette in his first season and wasn't overly productive. I think he can certainly outperform this 73 grade that he's at right now. I don't think he's got perfect vision. I don't think he's the most powerful guy in the world. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he is shifty, really good elusiveness, and understands kind of tackling angles and how to make guys miss. Just needs to do more of it and get a larger workload and prove what he can do. But as far as running back rooms are concerned, they're about as unproven as it gets here. Now, Chase Edmonds, you want to be more excited about, but it was just such a disappointing year last year after leaving Arizona. And you can't even say, the wide zone scheme fit will help him because he was in Miami and Denver who run those same systems, and he didn't really show the juice to thrive in those schemes. It was just no other way around it, a disappointing year for Chase Edmonds. He gets brought in basically for free to Tampa here, and I think he's going to be good as a scat back for them. But as far as what he's going to bring to the table as a runner, you love that he's produced in the NFL in the past, but I don't think you can have too high of expectations for him. I already kind of talked about Sean Tucker and Ronnie Brown. I cheated getting their conversations in earlier because I was just excited about the idea of them making the team. But I will reiterate, Sean Tucker definitely has a chance to be the best running back in this room if everything goes in a certain way. Keyshawn Vaughn, I never believed in, and I certainly don't now. I don't think he has good vision. I don't think he has the athletic juice to be a plus running back in the NFL. And with all due respect, if I was a Bucs fan, I would want to see Sean Tucker and Ronnie Brown, who I talked about being a super explosive running back. I would prefer to see what those guys can do than give Keyshawn Vaughn yet another year here, who I thought was overdrafted to begin with. You're going to get a very minor bump from all of the play action boots here, trying to keep that backside edge honest on outside zone. Baker Mayfield is a good play action boot threat. John Wolford is a decent runner as well, but nothing substantial there. Most teams get at least that level of bump. So to recap the offense, it is not great. This is going to be the biggest overall weakness of this Bucs team. The passing game is going to rank 27th. At least you have some weaponry there, and hopefully you can be optimistic about the scheme. And there is upside, right? Like if Baker can get things straight, that's the biggest swing factor there. But if Dave Canales does happen to be a gem of a signing, and if the right side of that offensive line can figure some stuff out with those young players, this certainly could be a top 16 or so passing game. The run game, however, I don't see the same upside. I definitely think the run blocking can improve, which would obviously help, but I just don't see a dynamic running back room, which is important. And I just, scheme-wise, we talked about it. The Seahawks, the Rams, I've never felt like these teams are overly dynamic in the run game, and it's not like you have some mobile threat at quarterback either to change the numbers. So they could certainly be better than the 32nd run game in the NFL if a lot of these questions go the right way. But if this offense is even average, it's going to have to be through the air, I think. But now we get to turn to the other side of the ball where it is a much more positive outlook, and we're going to start with the defensive line. And this is a group that has some question marks for sure, but I'm really excited for this defensive line this year, and I think it's a really interesting tandem here. They're going to rank 20th for me for pass rush right now, with some of those question marks, most notably with the pass rush. And then D-line run defense for them is going to rank 4th, and obviously such a big part of that is having Vita Vea here, who I think is known around the league and among fans as the creme de la creme among nose tackles. And if you want to pick him as your number 1 nose tackle in the NFL, I certainly don't have any gripes with that. I'd put him number 2 right now behind what DJ Reader accomplished over the last couple of years for the Cincinnati Bengals. But that's besides the point and not meant to take away from Vita Vea, who is the ultimate force multiplier for everybody around him. He eats and swallows double teams, opens things up, and they craft this entire front and their scheme around having this player in there. In fact, in the last deep dives, I've only listed 4 defensive linemen as starters here. Well, the Bucs, as I said earlier, they're one of the few teams left in the league that really are not afraid to come out in a base 3-4 defense on early downs. And it's because of how dominant they're able to be in the run defense out of those fronts as to why they like to do that. But they can't do that without Vita Vea, who just dominates everything surrounding the center. And having this space eater in the middle who doesn't just eat and swallow double teams, because you can put any 360 pounder in there to do that, but he can actually shed and stop runs when they enter his lane. He can split double teams, and he can rush the passer better than most nose tackles in the league, if not all true nose tackles in the league. But he also allows you to go out and get guys like Kalijah Cansey or take swings on guys like Logan Hall last year, who are these kind of tweener types who need to play as more of a 4-eye or a wide 3 technique, and like not face double teams at all. And that's going to be allowed to happen here in these bare fronts where Kalijah Cansey is just asked to play one gap. For a guy that had size concerns, this might have been the best team that he could have gone to. Case in point, this team has played William Golston in that spot for years, and he's been very successful there. If any other team tried to ask him to be a 3 technique, he would get obliterated. But teams have to focus on Vita Vea, and the way they craft their fronts around him opens things up for everybody else to just get one-on-ones, to shoot gaps and play aggressive. And that's why the Bucs have been, honestly, a historically great run defense over the last 3 years or so. So I think the conversation has to start there, and we're going to revisit Kalijah Cansey in a moment, but I want to kick out to the edge and talk a little bit about their number 1 pass rusher, Shaq Barrett. And honestly, if everything goes right here, this can pretty easily be a top 10 pass rush in the NFL, but there's just questions, and Shaq Barrett's health and age are a part of that. He's coming off an Achilles tear from last year at 31 years old, and was already a little bit down in terms of per play pass rush production last season. And it's just a question mark. I know the optimist in people will say, oh, he'll get back. He'll be getting his 80 pressures and 15 sacks again. But I just don't know if you can fully count on that. Father time comes for everybody, and I just don't know if Shaq Barrett is going to get back to being that true number 1 pass rusher that he was. It's certainly possible. Modern medicine and sports science has done wonders for a lot of players Shaq Barrett's age, but again, I just don't know if you can count on it. But if he can get back to 100% of what Shaq Barrett has been really since he joined the Bucs, this pass rush is definitely in business, because this is a player that has had, as I said, multiple 80 pressure, 15 sack seasons, true number 1 production on the edge. And he's just so persistent, not just as a pass rusher where he can beat you with power, he can rip inside, he can win with bend around the corner, but as a run defender, he has some of the best tenacity and understanding of just how to work around and through his guy to penetrate in the backfield and do it without compromising his gap. He's a really special run defender. It's mostly instinctive and physicality, and again, a scheme that really allows him to thrive in those run defense situations. But his health is going to be probably the biggest pivot factor for this defense, other than maybe their fifth defensive back, which is another thing we're going to cover later. But there's definitely a world where he's regressing and is more of a number two kind of guy, where you're getting 40, 50 pressures and maybe 8 sacks, which is still good, but not great when you don't have a great pass rusher here. There's also a world where he's just not able to get back fully healthy. A lot of people say Achilles tears can take up to 2 years. And again, he's older. So just a lot of questions on Shaq Barrett and what he's going to be this year. Places a lot of fog of war on trying to rank the Bucs pass rush. But it's not just him that adds some of that fog of war mystery factor here, because Joe Tryon now in year 3 is entering kind of a shit or get off the pot type of season here, where he's shown flashes and incremental growth. But for a guy with his physical explosiveness and being a former first round pick, you got to be more than like a rotational third rusher, which is basically the level that he's played at. He's definitely shown the flashes, right? Like, he can pull off spin moves and win with speed and bend, and he's had some highlight sacks on tape, but it's all about consistency. It's all about making those pass rush moves more effective on a snap-to-snap basis, not just having those high-end plays. I think he needs to use his size and even add some play strength to play the run better as well, though this scheme does shelter him in that regard. It's just a big year for him, right? They're going to have to make a decision on his fifth-year option. He was definitely viewed as kind of a boomer bust first-round pick kind of guy, and this is going to be a big year for him that obviously is going to add a lot of variance. He has potential to be a quality starter in the NFL, and the biggest thing for me is, like, kind of like I said with the play strength, I think he needs a little bit more of a threat of the bull rush. He got away with his size at Washington, but he hasn't been able to really take over blockers and keep tackles kind of on their heels, ready for the bull rush. And I think that'd be a big improvement for him to add to his game this season. Let's stick on the edge before we move inside and talk about Kalijah Kancey and some of these interior guys. Anthony Nelson, I feel very confident is going to be essentially a rotational starter between them, trying to keep Shaq Barrett healthy and Joe Tryon not being the best early down run defender. I think between Anthony Nelson, Tryon, and Shaq Barrett, you're probably all looking at 500 or 600 snaps a piece. And that's because Anthony Nelson is a really high-end run defender on the edge. He's got length. He's 6'5", 275. He looks a little bit weird standing up as an outside linebacker in this system, but it works for him. He's able to just kind of stand straight and take control of his guy, and that length works wonders on the edge. He's shown sprinkles of pass rushing as well, so if he is out there on early downs and you get play action or standard drop back, you know, he can place his hands inside. He's like a really poor man's version of what Lucas Van Ness was for the Iowa Hawkeyes here for the Tampa Bay Bucs. So, you know, you got to mention him as a rotational starter for sure. And then you've got a bunch of youth. You've got Yaya Diaby, a third-round pick, certainly has athletic, explosive potential, and I believe in him to work out here. I love him being mentored by Shaq Barrett, who's kind of a similar size profile. But as far as year one impact from Yaya Diaby, who was asked to kind of play a 4 technique at Louisville, which was just absurd at 255 pounds, I don't know exactly what you're going to get from him. Of course, he could just completely surprise and be one of those guys where it was more of a what he was asked to do as opposed to what he can't do, which is typically where a lot of scouting gems come from. And Yaya Diaby was certainly asked to do something bizarre as basically an interior player at Louisville. There's a world where he comes in and actually he has this diverse set of pass rush moves, and all he needed to do was rush from a wide alignment and let him loose. I mean, he's got speed, he's got bend, he's got good raw power. From a physical perspective, the sky's the limit for this guy. It's going to come down to technique and work behavior to see what kind of player he can be. But year one, I think he's going to be a little bit buried as long as Shaq Barrett is healthy. But in time, I do think he has potential to be your Shaq Barrett replacement. Jose Ramirez is a good 6th-round pick. I don't think he has the physical tools to be a high-end starter, though we said that about Shaq Barrett, who was an undrafted free agent. And Jose Ramirez's rush style and play style, I think I even had this in my draft guide, reminds me a lot of Shaq Barrett. He stays low to the earth. He wins with rips. He has just a wide variety of pass rush moves and good instincts to get after the quarterback. So I'm not going to say it can't happen for Jose Ramirez. I totally see what they see in him. It's just, finding a Shaq Barrett is an incredibly tall task. He's 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 1,000 players. Then you got some other kind of undrafted journeyman type, Cam Gill. Hamilcar Rashed is here. Physical tools out of Oregon State, just looked like Khalil Mack on, just his body profile. Doesn't have the pass rushing skill set, obviously, but maybe keep an eye on Rashed there, among some other names that I just don't think are going to make the team. And then you slide inside, and we already kind of talked about Vita Vea, who's got some overwhelming power rush ability and is a dominant run defender. But this, Kalijah Cansey pick in the first round is going to be huge for how good this pass rush can be. And the thing I've always said about Kalijah Cansey is you're going to know immediately if this was a good pick or not, which is fun because his technique is incredible, his effort, and I think his play strength is virtually maxed out for what he is, which is a 6'1", 280-pound defensive tackle / DN type. But you're going to know right away if his size deficiencies are going to be an issue at the next level or not, right? That's not something that's going to change over time, really. Again, he's a technically polished player. If he can play with 30.5-inch arms at 280 pounds at the next level, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen here. I think he's a sneaky Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate because I do think this defense is going to be pretty good, and I think the opportunity for sack production is going to be there. I don't know exactly what his odds are, but again, if the size isn't an issue for him at the next level, you're going to know. And he's going to come out, and third downs, he is an absolute handful to handle because he doesn't just have finesse and quickness. He has legit power. And when he gets his hands on you, you aren't going, or you are going for a ride, rather. And you never want to make the Aaron Donald comps, but he was a dominant pass rusher at Pitt. You see a lot of Aaron Donald in his game. It'd be incredible if they got Aaron Donald here. But if they get something between Aaron Donald and Ed Oliver, I think that's in play. I liked this pick, and I loved the fit for the variety of reasons we've discussed because of how they get these guys in a good position to succeed in this scheme. And then the Greg Gaines signing is remarkably underrated. He popped to me watching that Rams tape for the Rams deep dive. When Aaron Donald went down, he had to step up and be that guy. And his play took a next level when they asked that of him. He took on a real leadership role with that defense. He was dominating his lane up front. He was even getting after the quarterback as a pass rusher. And he brings some size that Kalijah Cansey doesn't. He can play the nose if Vita Vea needs some reps on the gas mask. But he can play the 3 technique as well. He can 2-gap as a 2 in front of the guard. You can do so many nice things with this variety of defensive linemen. It's going to be a really difficult task to keep these guys blocked up front. The depth with the interior defensive linemen isn't... it's okay, and we're already listing 3 guys here. Logan Hall, to me, was an example of draft grades actually mattering, because I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on Logan Hall. They drafted him essentially as a 1st round pick. They traded out of the 1st, took him 34th overall. And I said, great scheme fit, but he's just not a good football player, man. He was, play strength wise, was not there as it is with Kalijah Cansey. Logan Hall plays upright. He doesn't have any pass rush moves. I hated his run defense at Houston. Theoretically, the physical tools are there. The coaching, the scheme fit is there. You don't want to just write him off already in year 2. But the Bucs seemingly are, as they spent a premium draft asset on basically his replacement in Kalijah Cansey. That much was pretty clear, that they don't really believe in what they saw from Logan Hall. I don't want to go throwing the bus tag around, and they're going to rotate him because of the draft capital they invested in him, and there's not a ton of other depth here. But I'm not a Logan Hall believer. I'd be surprised if he turned into a useful player. In fact, I like Deidrin Senat better than Logan Hall. Sanat's been in the league for a while. I want to say he was originally in Atlanta, and his tape in college reminded me so much of Grady Jarrett as a 6 foot, 310 pound defensive tackle who gets really easy leverage, good core strength, the difficult guy to keep blocked as a pass rusher in college, at least. I think Deidrin Sanat can definitely fill into the Rakeem Nunez-Roches role, where, again, I said earlier in this video, Nunez-Roches played well last year. I think Deidrin Sanat can be a good fourth rotational defensive tackle. That's not too much to ask from him, and I think he can handle it. So I guess that makes him a breakout candidate of sorts, but I don't think he's going to be like some incredible starter either. And then beyond that, Patrick O'Connor's been here, but with Cansey and Logan Hall on the roster, I don't know if they need another guy like that in Patrick O'Connor, who's kind of that tweener type. And then some undrafted guys in year 2 competing for practice squad spots probably. But yeah, 20th for pass rush with obvious upside. I mean, if Shaq Barrett's healthy and Kalijah Cansey's coin lands on the positive side, and maybe Joe Tryon takes a step up to being like a good number 2. I mean, shit, this could be a top 5 to 10 pass rush this year, which is going to help this team exceed their 29th ranking. But there's no denying that there are really question marks across the board with this unit, whether it's Tryon taking that step, Shaq Barrett, Kalijah Cansey, like we've said. So let's move on to the linebacking group. Such a dynamic duo here, even if Devin White remains one of the more overrated players in the league, although I think most people have seen enough bad Devin White tape at this point to realize his deficiencies. But let's start with Lavonte David, as we should. I mean, this guy at his age, I think he's 33, maybe 34 now, is still a top 3 linebacker in the NFL. I think from a mental side of things, it's hard because Fred Warner's awesome. But from a mental side of things, I don't know if there is a linebacker that processes information, whether it's run defense or coverage, as well as he does. And he's fast, and he has good play strength. There's just not much to really say about Lavonte David other than he still has it, man. And for this team, like Devin White even gets a lot of the media coverage and a lot of the, Tom Brady and Mike Evans. Like, there's been so much star talent here. Lavonte David has quietly been one of the 3 most consistent superstars for the Bucs, not just with Tom Brady, but before Tom Brady got there. He took a hometown discount to stay here. How can you not love Lavonte David? He's going to be a key reason they rank 3rd in the NFL for linebacker coverage, because I think, between him and Fred Warner, I think you're flipping a coin as far as who the better coverage linebacker is. Warner probably has a little bit more range, so you might take him, but that's pretty, rare territory. And as a run defender, he had one of the best years in his career last year. So, these linebackers have shown, even just in this division alone with him and Demario Davis, age doesn't seem to come for these linebackers in the way that it might for other positions these days. Now, Devin White is such a unique player to put into this mix because with the way they use him, yes, he's a liability in coverage when they drop him, but very often they're going to be blitzing him and spying him and putting him in very basic coverage assignments and asking Lavonte David to run the pole in cover 2 or man up on a tight end and the difficult stuff. And you have to factor in the fact that he's probably the best blitzing linebacker in the NFL with his 4.4 speed at 245 pounds and his, maniac pursuit to the ball. But it is also that maniac pursuit to the ball that can hurt him in run defense. He takes about as bad of angles as anybody in the league at the linebacker position. He overruns tackles. He underruns tackles. You'll also see him lose gap discipline against the run. And, if you really break down the X's and O's and you see a 20-yard run, you're like, oh, that was Devin White's gap that he just completely abandoned. There's real issues with Devin White's game, and there's a reason that he didn't get traded because he wants to be paid because this has been such a big name team and he was the 4th overall pick and, he's got sack production and, there's things about him to like, but no one in their right mind is paying a top dollar linebacker contract to Devin White, who just doesn't do linebacker things very well. They scheme him up and make him a unique asset for their team. And with his speed and physical presence, it's a nice thing to have, but he is genuinely one of the worst overall defensive players on this defense. I don't know. It's a unique conversation. They still rank 7th for linebacker run defense, and so much about it, so much of that is Lavonte David. As far as the depth is concerned, I am drooling about the Servasia Dennis pick. I've already pointed to 2 teams in this deep dive series that I think should have drafted Servasia Dennis ahead of some other players. He was one of my biggest my guys in this draft. I see him as almost a guaranteed Devin White replacement. In fact, I think his skill set is very similar as far as the ability to rally to the football and to blitz, where he was awesome at Pittsburgh. But I think Dennis is already a more measured and disciplined linebacker than Devin White is. So, like, I see him as the easy replacement in 2024, but if you've got a trade partner for Devin White and someone wants to give you a 3rd-round pick for him, dude, I would give him up and just start Servasia Dennis, get that thing going, let him learn for a year, but next to Lavonte David, because I see legitimate upside in Servasia Dennis in a linebacker class that there just weren't a lot of players that I fell in love with. Dennis was one of those guys as a day 3 player. Now, there's, it's not a guarantee that he's going to be a rock star, but I'd bet on Servasia Dennis here. I think he went to a dream scenario as far as coaching, scheme fit, opportunity, and having a mentor like Lavonte David. Beyond that, you got KJ Britt, who's a really poor man's Devin White. He's a heat-seeking missile without a targeting system. I don't see him competing for starting work. Ulysses Gilbert, a balanced veteran. J.J. Russell, and another good undrafted pickup in Jeremy Banks, who's a really good athlete. I thought he was a draftable prospect as any number of these athletic, developmental day 3 linebackers. This is a guy that had off-field concerns early in his career. Was actually out of football, I think, for a year, and then came back and was eventually, I want to say, a team captain and earned the trust of the coaching staff back, and ended up being one of the better players on Tennessee's defense. So I would definitely see him making the team over basically anybody other than Servasia Dennis, and there's going to be similar opportunities for Banks as there are for Dennis. So definitely an undrafted free agent to keep an eye on. But let's wrap up the roster portion of the video by taking a look at this secondary that's still awesome, although much thinner than it once was. I see 4 quality starters plus, and then a strange amount of question marks for an NFL secondary. I don't remember a secondary as thin as this, but let's focus on the good here because they do still rank 9th. They have enough star talent here that I think it can overshadow some potential weaknesses here. But if they could get a good, if D. Delaney or Zion McCollum, who we're going to talk about, if they could fill in as a starting caliber player, you then have 5 quality starters and genuinely one of the best secondaries in the NFL. So you got Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, which is such a great cornerback duo because both these guys can do a little bit different stuff and you can match them up. This is not a team that's afraid of moving one of these guys into the slot or having one guy play on the left side, one drive or one game, and then on the right side the next. They will put these guys in spots where they can succeed. And Carlton Davis can handle those big physical wide receivers, the T. Higgins, the Mike Williamses. He has great press technique, physical down the field, without getting overly grabby, great at the catch point. Is he lockdown? No, pretty much no corner is, other than maybe Sauce and Pat Surtain. But he is easily a top 20 corner in the NFL, and I would say he is a legitimate number 1 corner. I also think Jamel Dean can be a legitimate number 1 corner, even if both these guys are in the middle to lower end. But I don't know if they are. They are probably closer to top 10 than they are top 20, both of these guys. Jamel Dean had a great start to last year, tapered off a little bit as the year went on, but he's a really unique skill set where he is incredibly fast and he's built like a freaking linebacker or a strong safety. So when you talk about if he's playing in the slot or if you try to run a toss or outside zone his way, you aren't blocking him if you're a wide receiver. He's just too strong. And that shows up at the catch point, banging with receivers down the field. You just don't find corners with the raw strength that he has too often. He's a true, genuine freak athlete. Now, he's a little bit of a hip tight. If he's trying to stay in a guy's hip pocket and mirror route movements deep down the field, he can be a little bit more boom or bust in that way. But hey, to have that guy essentially as your number 2 corner here, you'll absolutely take that. And then I want to talk about Antoine Winfield because it's going to be up in the air as far as how they're going to use him. And we're going to ask Trevor shortly about his opinions on how they're going to use him. But Winfield has played anything from free safety to strong safety to last year playing a lot of slot corner. And shit, if he's just a straight up slot corner, which I don't think is completely out of the question based on a lot of the good film he put out there last year, truly as a slot corner, which he played a lot of in Minnesota, you have arguably the best cornerback trio in the NFL right here in Tampa. Now, it's not as simple as to just say he's a slot because he's got great tape as a free safety. He's got range. He's aggressive without compromising the deep post. Like, he is also quite possibly, I mean, you got Derwin and Jamal Adams, but outside of those like 210 plus pound safeties, I think Antoine Winfield is next as far as run defense at the safety position. He's impossible to block because he is 5'9". He's so fast, and he is also, like Jamel Dean, built like a linebacker. So even if you do get your hands on him, he's going to kind of show almost like pass rush style bend and work through blocks. And he emerged as an elite tackler last year. He's also an amazing blitzer from the slot or from strong safety. I'm such a big Antoine Winfield fan, man. I'm so glad I had him as a top 20 player in that draft and a true first round grade. And he's definitely lived up to that. You know, him coming in as a rookie and being such a good safety was a big part of them filling in a hole and winning that Super Bowl that they did, him and Tristan Wirfs. He's still had some ups and downs as far as coverage is concerned, but they ask a lot of him in coverage. I still think Antoine Winfield is a top 5 safety in the NFL, and with some more coverage consistency can, you know, get the national recognition, maybe make an all-pro team, and for him, get that huge contract that he definitely deserves here or somewhere else. Would love to see Antoine Winfield reset the safety market when he's up, and a big year here could get him there. And then they bring in Ryan Neal, which was a good signing. They've had a lot of these run defender types, whether it was Mike Edwards or Jordan Whitehead. I think Ryan Neal can absolutely play that role, and I don't know if they just at all times need to have a Ryan or a Neal in the secondary because they had Keanu Neal and Logan Ryan last year, so it might get a little confusing there. But, you know, he had a breakout year for the Seahawks last year when Jamal Adams went down, and he, to me, is going to be that Mike Edwards replacement. He's going to be the true strong safety this year, which to me is why I think Antoine Winfield's either going to be the free safety or the slot corner. Probably the free safety, though. Or they'll just mix things up, as Todd Bowles likes to do. But, you know, Neal had some flashes in coverage last year. I think his arrow can still be pointing up. It was just a one-year wonder for a guy that's been around for so long. But he's long and fast and definitely has the physical tools to continue to get better in a new system here. So I like those 4 quite a lot. That's the key reason they rank 9th. And the number one reason, by the way, they rank in the tier 1 of run defense. I mean, the way these guys can get off blocks and rally to the ball and finish tackles, it's hard to beat, man. It's another reason why this run defense is so good. But after those 4, whoa, like woof, you've got 2 huge question marks with your next men up. And again, we're going to have to wait and see how they want to deploy all these guys because they have options. You have Zion McCollum, who I thought was one of the steals of the draft last year, but definitely was not ready to go right away. He took his lumps in his rookie year. Now he is quite literally like a top 3 most athletic on paper corner to ever enter the NFL. Came out of Sam Houston State, though. The level of competition jump, the technique, just it was not there. He lost way too often in coverage, and for him to be a starter essentially going into the year would lead to some concerns. The smart quarterbacks, the smart coaches would pick on Zion McCollum until he shows that he has the reactionary quickness and awareness to play the position. He's also a putrid run defender, which we know this staff is not going to like. They clearly put a premium on that. But there will be defensive looks where it's these 3 corners with Davis, Dean, and McCollum, with Winfield and Neal as the safeties. And then there are other opportunities for maybe D. Delaney to come in as either a safety or a slot corner, where he played both last year. And you can, play Winfield as a free safety or a slot corner, and then Neal is a free safety, Delaney is the strong safety, Winfield is the slot corner. You get the point. There's really a large list of different ways you can deploy these guys, but at the end of the day, you're going to have a question of either Zion McCollum or D. Delaney when they're out there. Delaney was a little bit better last year, though it came in less snaps and was even more of an unknown player and was from a lot of safety alignments as opposed to corner. So, I don't think the secondary is going to suck either way, but if McCollum reaches his upside, or if D. Delaney can cement himself as a good, starting defensive back, you very well might have a top 3 or 4 secondary in the NFL here. They also draft Josh Hayes in the 6th round. He wasn't on my radar, but a slot corner out of Kansas State, who they clearly liked enough to draft him. So he can absolutely get into the mix as their starting slot. We've seen a lot of 6th, 7th undrafted free agent types get starting work in the slot. Case in point, D. Delaney. But not just here. That's a trend around the league. They also have some kind of undrafted veterans, if you will, in year 2 or 3. Anthony Chesley, who's had a cup of coffee in the NFL, and then everybody else is basically complete unknowns. So it's a rare lack of depth with this secondary. And you also have to say, if you have any injuries there, which these guys have all been on and off the field in spurts, yikes, man, it falls off quickly. It's not like the Texans where you can turn to Shaq Griffin if someone goes down. No, you're then turning to McCollum and Josh Hayes and Anthony Chesley, right? So I think they would benefit if they want to try and win, benefit from picking up a veteran corner out there. As far as the safety depth is concerned, honestly, the only one I've ever heard of is Kayvon Merriweather, who was undrafted, not a great athlete, but a physical run defender out of Iowa, rallies to the football well. And I do think there's potential for Merriweather to be a safety, but I don't love him in coverage. So, I think if you could move Ryan Neal to free safety, because this team does like to run single high. They want to go cover 1. They want to go cover 3 at times. Someone here has to play free safety. If you think Neal can be a free safety, I think there's a world where you can put Winfield in the slot and Merriweather as that strong safety type, the Mike Edwards role. And there's a world where that's their best trio. Definitely going to be fun to see how they choose to deploy these guys for the scheme nerds out there, because there's a lot of mixing and matching that they're going to be able to do until they find which group makes sense for them. So let's wrap things up with our team summary, and I guess we got to do our defensive summary. So they are going to rank as the 10th best defense in the NFL, 13th in pass defense, and 2nd in run defense. We've been raving about this run defense throughout the course of this video, but I think with the pass defense, you just, you have pass rush questions, and you have the question marks of that 5th player in the secondary. But if those two things can get answered, you're talking about Todd Bowles reinvigorating our belief in him, because those are two tall tasks. And you're also talking about this being genuinely one of the 5 best defenses in the NFL, just as they were in the Tom Brady days. But of course, ranking as the 31st overall offense is going to provide some complications. The defense is going to be on the field a lot, potentially in short fields if Baker's not taking care of the football, or if Kyle Trask isn't taking care of the football. Very much at this point in time, a one-sided football team after losing Tom Brady at quarterback, which isn't horribly unexpected. I think their special teams are pretty good. I like some of the linebacker additions, for kick coverage, to potentially improve that group a little bit. But also they bring in Chase McLaughlin, who was a very accurate kicker for the Colts. So I think that's a group that'll see some minor gains this year. We're going to tie a ribbon on all of this before we get to our interview with Trevor. So to recap their strengths and weaknesses, really offensively, their only identifiable strength at the moment is going to be that plus wide receiver duo with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. But then defensively, they got this dominant run defense yet again up front that I think could be even more improved than it was last year if Shaq Barrett can get healthy. And then playmakers in coverage on the back end too. I mean, these guys, Dean, Carlton Davis, and Antoine Winfield, they're gonna turn the ball over, and they're gonna be in good position to make plays. So it's definitely not all bad for the Bucs. This team was, Super Bowl favorite a year ago for a reason. They're not deprived of talent. They just now have some pretty significant weaknesses, including massive quarterback questions, offensive line questions at risk of maybe being like one of the worst in the league if everything goes wrong. And then, that one piece in the secondary that they're going to have to find this year. And then let's look at the schedule and my win projections for this team. So Vegas has their over-under at 6.5 wins, right in line with these last couple of teams. Super Bowl odds 95-1. Their division odds right now on FanDuel are 6-1. There is upside with this team. If Baker comes back to life and all those other question marks can land the right way, I don't think them winning this division is out of play. If you're a big believer in this team, you can do it. And then, if those things do go right, there's upside with this team that maybe they could sneak through the playoffs. I don't know. That's obviously an optimistic outlook, but I think those odds are fair enough for the Bucs. There's worse bets you could make, I think. But taking a middle of the road approach to this and a most likely scenario, I think this is a 5-win team. I don't really see the Baker thing playing out. I think there are legitimate concerns about the offensive line in this passing game. And there's one too many questions for this to project as an elite defense. So you're looking at this team probably being a slight underdog in the majority of their games. Now, they do have a pretty easy schedule. That is worth noting. Their own division stinks. And they play the AFC South, the weakest of AFC divisions. And they play the NFC North as opposed to having to play the East, for example. So there might be some more winnable games in there than you expect, but even then, I'm not taking the over-under at 7 wins. I'd rather bet them to win the division, because if they're going over 7, they're going to be in play for the division. I'd rather get 6-1 odds than even money. But I really hope you guys enjoyed. Again, please do hit that like button if you haven't already. It really does help me out. Make sure you're subscribed as well, but do not go anywhere. We have an amazing interview now with the Tampa Bay Trevor Sikkema of PFF. And I'm going to say my goodbyes now and roll the interview. Thank you for watching. And now I'm thrilled to welcome in a special guest to the deep dive for the second year in a row, Tampa Bay Trey himself, Trevor Sikkema. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for coming on. I know you and Connor just dropped the summer scouting notes for your upcoming quarterback class, aka your 5 favorite future Tampa Bay Buccaneer quarterbacks. How you doing, buddy? Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I'm doing great, my friend. It's always good to be with you. Always good to chat with you. We just started to jump into summer scouting because we know that people can't get enough of the NFL draft, and so we just did quarterbacks. And funny enough, I think Tampa might be in the market for a quarterback a year from now or 9 months from now. So maybe I'm learning the names of who I'm going to talk about on the show next year. Who knows? But it's great to be with you as always, dude.
Yeah. Everyone, make sure you go check out the Stock Exchange podcast and all of Trevor's good work over at PFF. So let's talk a little bit of Bucks, my friend. The mighty have certainly fallen. You were on in in late August last year for the number 1 ranked Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This year, they're coming in early summer ranking 29. So yeah, again, the mighty have fallen, but as a draft analyst and enthusiast yourself, I wanted to just, walk through their draft together and get your thoughts on some of your favorite picks, maybe if there were some picks that weren't your favorite. So if you want, we can just kind of go down the board and what you think about each pick.
Yeah, I mean, that works for me. If you just want to do it like that, we could totally do it like that. That sounds good.
Yeah, let's do it. So what'd you think of Kancey?
So I like Kancey as a player. It felt like him as a prospect was a microcosm of what the entire draft was. And that was just a lot of really unique players. You didn't really know what to do with them. I feel like if you would plop Kalijah Kancey in, draft classes, say 5-6 years ago, a lot of people would have looked at him and been like, no, he's not for me. Like, I'm not drafting a player of this size. He's not going to be able to hold up on defensive lines. Like, it's just not going to happen. But in this class in particular, outside of Jalen Carter, there really was not a big time defensive end that could really get after the passer. Now there's a handful of guys that, I liked in the class as well, like Keanu Benton, somebody who immediately comes to mind, but nobody really had that pass rushing profile that Kalijah Cansey did. And so I understand why they liked him. Todd Bowles, as a defensive coordinator and now a head coach, is very into versatility along his defensive line. They drafted Logan Hall the year before and kind of along the same lines. This is somebody who we can play in odd fronts and even fronts. We can play him on the interior. We can play him on the edge. That feels like they got a similar player in Kalijah Cansey. Now, you could say a little bit of redundancy there. I would push back on that a little bit and just say, one, they're totally different players. Like, they're built very differently. Their
Mhm.
sizes, their measurables very different, and how they win is very different. And two, there's not a lot that's established along Tampa's defensive line. Certainly, we know that Vita Vea is going to be a consistent player for them in the middle, but you got Shaq Barrett coming back from Achilles injury. Achilles injuries are tough for any of the positions that really demand explosiveness, change of direction, that lower body, ankle flexibility, all that stuff. And that's what pass rushing is all about. So I certainly hope that Shaq Barrett comes back and is
Especially his play style.
exactly right. And I think that I hope that he comes back and is fully healthy, is playing great, but it's just no guarantee at this point. So if you really can't count on Barrett, you've just got to get as many guys that you could throw at the pocket as possible. So the Cansey pick made sense. I would have picked Anton Harrison myself, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma, because I think the offensive line needs are more paramount than selecting Cansey for this defensive line. But I do understand why they picked him. I wouldn't say that it's a bad pick by any means. And we know that Todd Bowles is going to have some fun with where he lines him.
Do you think, like, not to be overly pessimistic, but do you think any of it is they really don't like Logan Hall?
I don't know. I mean, and that's an interesting question. I just think we're a year too early to genuinely ask that. Now, there might be stuff behind the scenes where they've got him in this past year and they go, yeah, this guy ain't gonna make it in the NFL. And if that's the case, that's really bad. But
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case yet. I think we can honestly maybe ask that question if we're in a similar spot a year from now.
Mhm.
Because he is going to have every opportunity, it feels like, to make a difference in this current Tampa defensive line. So I think that question's maybe a year early, but it is something worth noting because it is one of the reasons why I was not totally shocked, but a little surprised. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, okay, they went with Cansey over an offensive lineman or a different type of position. So yeah, that does go into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get to Cody Mock, and I think I'm curious what you like after a month to kind of let it sit where you're
Mhm.
at. Because correct me if I'm wrong, you were kind of like me where I think you, me, and Connor all kind of had this. I can't remember if we talked about this when you guys came on, but it's like if you take the long hair and give him two front teeth, he's a fourth round pick.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I do think that there is some truth to that. I think that Connor was the one who ended up bringing that up, and it's funny, and there is a little bit of truth to it. But I also think that he is the perfect Jason Light player. Like, you look at some of the offensive linemen that Jason Light has either drafted or brought in during his tenure as general manager, and it's Ali Marpet, right? Small school, spit and vinegar type of a player who was incredible for them before he retired early. Alex Kappa, who was that dude who was kind of like, the long hair, the big body, the
Yeah.
small school as well. And it's like, okay, well, he was a really good contributor along their interior offensive line too. Ryan Jensen, they prioritized him in free agency, right? Long red hair, again, guy who eats a bowl of nails for breakfast. And it just, that type of player, both look, style, demeanor, everything is exactly what Jason Light has
Hmm.
gravitated towards. So when they picked him in the second round, I kind of had a smile on my face because I said, of course. Like, of
Yeah.
course, Jason really wanted to come away with this guy. And I'm not exactly sure what Mock's best position is going to be in the NFL. I know that he's going to get a shot to start at one of their interior offensive line spots, probably one of the guard spots. But I actually think that center could be a long-term good play for him as well if he plays at guard, gets familiar with how the interior offensive line is played at the NFL level when Ryan Jensen retires, because he's not going to be around forever. He's probably going to be gone in the next couple of years. You might
Mhm.
be able to slide Cody Mock in there. Given his body type and everything, he might be a really good fit. I think at center. He's not going to play tackle like he did when he was at North Dakota State, but I do think at least that tackle background gives you a little bit of swing versatility if you're ever in an emergency. So the versatility along the interior offensive line, who he is, his demeanor, everything, and the fact that they needed somebody to step up in the draft and assume one of those interior offensive line spots, it made that one that fit what Tampa was going to go for.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. It's something I hadn't thought about, and those guys pretty much have all worked out. So,
Yeah, right.
just hoping for more of that. I think we're pretty good on Yaya, uh, you know, boomer bust athlete that could potentially replace Shaq Barrett. And
Mhm.
we talked about him as one of my guys when you guys were on, so we
Yeah.
can gloss over that. Was there a day 3 guy that you were like, yes, like thank God we got him, or not so much?
I think the Dennis pick is great. I really think that he has an opportunity to make a mark early in on this Tampa Bay team. I'm sure we'll get to talk about to Devin White a little bit. Levante David, again, Tampa Bay legend. He's playing really well still, but uh, you can only outrun Father Time so much. So there is a looming possibility that both Levante David and Devin White are gone within the next 2 years. Now, I don't think that Tampa wants that to be the case, but if Devin White really strongholds him on a contract, he might be going elsewhere. And of course, Levante David's not getting any younger. So you look at the rest of the depth chart behind them, and they don't really have anything. I mean, Anthony Nelson's more of an edge rusher than he is a linebacker. They've got KJ Britt, but all of a sudden, Dennis in 2 years could be a starter on this team as a fifth
Yeah.
round pick. And I think a lot of people really liked him out of Pittsburgh. I did as well. I figured that he was probably going to be an early day 3 pick, but man, it's a really good situation in Tampa for him to not have to play right away. Although I do think when they go to 3 down linebackers, if they're not throwing Britt out there, then you give him some Sam responsibilities, some Sam linebacker. You put him on the line of scrimmage a little bit, let him get physical. You're sitting there learning from Levante David. I think watching Devin White as well, and he's going to have his opportunities to play. So that was the one pick that I looked at and I said, man, this guy could really turn into a solid starter for them one day. And you just don't often get to say that about day 3 guys.
Yeah, I'm really excited about him. What about any undrafted guys that stood out to you? I was prepping for this deep dive, and I was like, "Oh, they got him! They got him! They got him!"
Yeah,
Like they did a
yeah.
really good, like better than most teams. I felt like getting some talent. There are there one or two guys you're especially excited about?
The two that really stand out, I had Sean Tucker, the running back out of Syracuse, as my RB2 going into the season. It's because I absolutely
Yeah.
loved what I saw from him his sophomore year when he rushed for over 1,400 yards. Now, you go back to this past season, the vision just wasn't the same. And maybe it was a little bit of me noticing something and the glass kind of shatters in your head. Once you see it once, then you can't stop seeing it.
Hmm.
Once I kind of watched a couple of his games evaluating him during this past year, I saw that the vision issues and I went, "Oh no." And it kind of became a consistency I felt like throughout the season. So really gifted physical back, and if he can get that vision, if he can see things in the open field, find that open grass, man, he's got the ability to have really great contact balance, and he put his foot in the ground, change direction, get upfield. He's got a lot of the physical gifts. He's just got to get that vision down. And that's a make or break trait for running back. So I'm excited about him because I think he's got a decent ceiling. And then the other one's Raheem Jarrett, the wide receiver out of Maryland. I mean, former 5-star wide receiver who was not able to live up to his potential at Maryland, but okay, yeah, it's a deep group in Tampa at the receiver position. You got Russell Gage, you got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin, and you're probably not cracking any of those lineups anytime soon, but maybe you get to a point where you become a real good depth player for them. Maybe Russell Gage in a couple of years isn't there. Maybe Jarrett plays so well you want him as your wide receiver 3. So those two guys are people who I think can be special team slash practice squad slash maybe like the very bottom of the depth chart kind of players who should stick around for a couple of years. And maybe who knows, given contracts, given injuries, whatever it is, they might have their opportunity to start. And I think they've got the talent level to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I took Tucker in the 4th round of my friends and family dynasty league,
Nice.
and everyone was like, "Who?" And I'm like, "Just you wait, because if he gets out there, I think he has a good chance to be like the next undrafted running back that does something." There's one or two of these guys every year, and he's
Yeah.
got definitely a chance to do that. And Jarrett, like you say that they've got a deep wide receiver room. They've got 3 starters, but other
I
than
mean, that's
that,
true too.
yeah,
And they drafted Trey Palmer for a reason as well, right? I
yeah,
think that what you're carrying 4 or 5 wide receivers anyways. Now you got to make your mark on special team when you're wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, but
right.
there are chances, you're right, to even make game day rosters early on for those guys.
Yeah, they were definitely looking for that, like, juice, like that
For
true
sure.
deep threat, I feel
Yeah.
like, because even,
Yep.
like, David Moore was the other veteran they brought in who's, like, a deep threat type, but, cool. I wanted to shift more towards, some of the existing talent and some of the questions on the roster.
Mhm.
The biggest question, obviously, is gonna be Baker Mayfield, so
Yeah.
what was your kinda gut reaction when they signed him, and what are your expectations for him?
So Brad Spielberger, I'll give Brad Spielberger a shout out. He is our cap guru at PFF. He is somebody who studies free agency, contracts, who's going to hit open market. He is my go-to when it comes to any and all offseason moves. He let me know that the Bucs were pretty interested in Baker Mayfield very early on. So I wasn't necessarily shocked when they made it official, but I also wasn't shocked stylistically even though Bruce Arians is no longer the head coach of this team, especially with Byron Leftwich now out, I figured that Arians, who is still in a senior advisory role, it's kind of like Jason Lights at the top. Bruce Arians is kind of next to him, and then obviously like it's Todd Bowles and the rest of the coaching staff that are underneath. So Arians doesn't necessarily have this title with a lot of power, but he has a lot of influence on the roster.
Mm,
He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. They respect him a ton. They obviously loved him during his time when he was there as coach. So, like I said, I think that's the way that you put it. Doesn't necessarily have power, but he's got a ton of influence. He is a Baker Mayfield is a Bruce Arians quarterback, like through and through. Just these gunslingers that Arians goes, no, we can fix them. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Now they tried that with Jameis and it didn't work, but this is just the type of quarterback that he's always gravitated towards. And it comes out after they sign him that, Bruce Arians was like, oh, we had a higher grade on Baker Mayfield. And I can't even remember who the
yeah,
example was, but it was insanely high praise for him, what they had the grade for him coming out of the draft. And it makes total sense when you think about who Arians is, the type of vertical offenses he loves to run. I mean, he's somebody who's always trying to push it down the field, that no risk it, no biscuit mantra that he has always carried. I think that goes into those passing game plans that he loves to gravitate towards. And also like the personality, the brashness of him, like the
mhm.
swagger, the moxie, if you will, how he's unapologetically him. Like it's Arians to a T. So the fit for, I think, the kind of personality that they want at such a leadership position makes a ton of sense. Now, is it going to work out? Of course, it's got to manifest itself out on the field. Interesting enough, I brought up Jameis Winston. Baker Mayfield's issues are Jameis Winston's issues. These are two guys who, by nature, want to push the ball down the field. And these are two guys who had a lot of success at the college level doing that. Jameis was notorious for always just chucking it deep downfield whenever his wide receivers had anything close to a 50-50 chance. And in college, it works a lot because the corners that play at the college level, so many of them are not future pros, especially not future starters at the pro level. It's way different when you get to the NFL. Jameis learned that the hard way, and Baker Mayfield is as well. The decision,
Did Jameis learn that?
well, he did. That doesn't mean that he changed, but he learned that lesson. I don't know that he didn't. He's not any different because of it. But that's kind of the way that I look at Baker Mayfield, because you look at so many different plays. For example, like you watch that Los Angeles Rams game. I think it was against the Raiders, right? Whatever that first game was that he played, and he absolutely balled out. And he didn't even know the playbook. They like signed him a couple of days earlier, and you go, "How did this happen?" Well, it's because Baker's not thinking about stuff. One, the Raiders secondary like just wasn't good. Two, he was out there playing backyard football. The best quarterbacks in the NFL, the Mahomes, the Allens, the Burrows, the whoever it is, the Jalen Hurts, whatever, they are able to play backyard football when things go wrong. But then when things are in structure, they are also able to be a great quarterback, a consistent player, a cerebral assassin, if you will. That part's not Mayfield. Mayfield's always down to be a backyard quarterback. But the play in, play out, reading defenses, going through progressions from within the pocket, the accuracy issues that he struggled with, like that's the stuff that it makes you scratch your head. you'll watch him make fantastic plays outside of structure 1 second. And then when he's in the pocket, he'll just miss a throw high or miss a throw left or right, or not see the safety when he should. And you go, man, you got to kind of figure that out. And so I think there's certainly reason to believe that he could play well in Tampa Bay. We haven't seen that consistently since the early days of him playing in Cleveland. Certainly over the last couple of years, it hasn't been very pretty for him. But I like the Arians' influence getting in his ear, kind of molding that type of a quarterback, because that is what he wants. That's the kind of player that he is seeking. And so that's kind of my thoughts on Mayfield, what I've gone back to watch, his fit in Tampa, and kind of what I think the outlook might be.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and it's there's a reason his best football's been in these kind of Shanahan systems where it's just read a couple routes, let it fly off of play action, as opposed to like Carolina, which was much more of a shotgun spread, pick defenses apart. So if it's gonna work, it's probably gonna be in this system. It's gonna be fun to see for sure. I wanted to revisit the offensive line a little bit. I'm curious to see how this is received by the fans once this video comes out, because I kind of listed 3 potential reasons for Tristan Wirfs. Tristan. I can't say that. Tristan Wirfs regression.
that is a little bit of a tongue twister there.
So number 1 is just right to left, straightforward.
Of course.
Then number 2 is how much Tom Brady protects offensive tackles with his pocket movement and his time to throw. Mm-hmm. He's like the ultimate, safeguard for offensive tackles and guards. And then number 3 is now going from a gap scheme, a very gap heavy scheme, to more of a wide zone offense. Mm-hmm. Like, I know he tested well at the combine, but and he's athletic relative to his size, but I still think he's a little clunky playing at 345, 350. So I'm just curious, is that in your head at all? Am I crazy to say that might happen?
I would rank. So if you had those 3 concerns of him, I would rank those concerns from least concerning to most concerning. The wide zone, going from a gap scheme to more of a wide zone scheme, it worries me the least. He is such a fantastic athlete. He's got an incredible multi-sport background. He's got that wrestling background. The core strength's unbelievable. He moves fantastically well. I think that more reps when he's getting out in space is the only thing really in the way of him being a really good out in space kind of a blocker. So that one I'm not concerned about as much. I would say that number 2 would be the switch from left to right. We've seen players do this before, and I do just think that Tristan Wirfs is a very naturally gifted offensive lineman. So whenever that's the case, I have faith that you can get that coordination down when you're moving from left to right. The offensive linemen always, they'll say that switching from left to right, yeah, it's possible, but it's like wiping your butt with your opposite hand. Like, it just feels really awkward. You're just not used to it. You don't have that muscle memory. So you got to get it down. And so that would be my number 2. My number 1 concern for him, and for the ones that you brought up, would be the Tom Brady factor, because this guy's time to throw, like you said, was insanely fast over the last 2 years, especially this past year. And I do think that, for as good as I think Tristan Wirfs is, because I do think that he's one of the best young offensive tackles in the game, that protects you. And the fact that he's had Tom Brady for his 3 years in the NFL, it's going to be different. There's going to be a lot more times where he's going to have to hold and maintain his blocks with Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, if Kyle Trask is the starter back there. And it's just going to be different. That in and of itself, I think, is going to take a little bit of time. Now, I don't think that Wirfs has poor work ethic or poor focus. Like, I think he's going to give up on plays, but still, when you've got to hold a block, even for 1 second longer, that can be the difference of, in your head, knowing not only do I have to block this original rush, not only do I have to block the counter, I might have to block a third. And so in your head, you're probably thinking, this guy's got, and understandably so, you say, this guy's got 2 moves max, right? In all honesty, it's probably 1, especially if they're coming and rushing from the outside. They've got 1 move, and if they can't get by me, Tom's going to have the ball out of his hands that fast. For other players that might be hanging in the pocket, trying to go through progressions, might be a little bit more hesitant. You got to stop the initial rush. you probably got to stop a counter. And there's even a chance with, especially with guys who might be scrambling outside the pocket, which Tom also did not do very much.
Mhm.
You might have to stay in front of them when it comes to a third counter or breaking loose, or when a guy takes off for the quarterback if he tries to get out of the pocket. So that to me is the one that is the most legitimate concern for, especially immediately for Tristan Wirfs as he moving from left to right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely not betting against him, but it is one of the more fascinating things for me just to
Totally.
keep an eye on for the year.
Yeah.
Okay, let's visit a little bit of the defense with the secondary, because
Mhm.
they have really like 4 very solid, dare I say studs. Ryan Neal's a good player. I like that signing. But what the hell is going on with the 5th defensive back spot? Like, do you okay, let me phase a couple questions for you.
Mhm.
Um, who do you think is the snap count leader of among the 5th options there? And which position do you think Antoine Winfield leads snaps at, free safety, strong safety, or slot corner?
So, the reason why this question is so intriguing is because the answer to the Winfield question is free safety. Todd Bowles said earlier this offseason he does not want Winfield Jr. playing in the slot as much. He wants him to play safety. And if you have Ryan Neal, who's a really good downhill player, Ryan Neal's probably going to play mostly that strong safety spot. So I got to think that they're going to try to play Antoine Winfield Jr. as a cover 1, cover 3 center fielder,
Mhm.
single high safety type. Because that's also, it's a typical Todd Bowles thing, right? He wants to be able to have a guy he can trust on the back end playing with one, and then he can get more aggressive in the fronts, throw more things at the pocket, get a little bit more exotic with what he's doing in his front 7.
Mhm.
So that makes me believe that he wants Antoine Winfield Jr. playing mostly that free safety spot. Ryan Neal, I think, is going to play, okay, maybe a little bit of slot, maybe strong safety, but I think predominantly going to be a box defender playing as a strong safety. And then if Winfield Jr. is not playing slot, I don't know who
Yeah.
CB3 is, because, I mean, if you're just looking at our lads, the depth chart website, D Delaney is slotted to be the nickelback, but you go, okay, well, maybe it's not going to be D Delaney. Who else is it going to be?
Yeah.
Zion McCollum, I mean, he's a big, long outside corner type of ability. You're probably not going to put him in that spot. Don Gardner, Keenan Isaac. They drafted Josh Hayes this past draft. Is he going to be ready for slot work? Like, it's just, there's not a lot of notable names to know. This is going to be the most fascinating training camp battle, because we know that defenses in the NFL play more nickel than they do quote unquote base. They've got 3 cornerbacks out there most of the time. So if you're purposefully taking Winfield Jr. away from that, then you've got to be more than okay with who you're going to have as your nickel corner. And so that to me is the most fascinating camp battle, because even if we know the name of, like, all right, well, D Delaney was the best in training camp, if you're posing it as was the best, not earned it, not like really deserved this spot, Tampa's going to get cooked from the slot this year.
Right.
So yeah, I think that that's definitely a big matchup to watch moving
Yeah.
forward.
And I feel like slot is the position where, like, because you don't it's a weak link position,
Mhm.
but if I feel like slot is specifically like you can really get carved up if your slot corner is bad, because that's
Nowadays, for sure, because
yeah.
you've got every team's wide receiver 1 plays in the slot now. Like, that's basically how it is. They're gonna get
Yeah.
slot reps at some point. They're gonna try to manipulate defenses as best they can. So I agree with you completely. If you are weak at slot, that's tough. That's gonna be tough to recover from.
How many slot snaps did Jamel Dean get over the last couple of years?
He is mainly just an outside
Is
corner.
he?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Did you
He only
pull it
played
up?
yeah, he only has 33.
Yeah, I'm telling you,
That's surprising.
he is almost exclusively an outside corner. D
That's
Delaney
interesting.
had 2 games last season where he played more than 30 snaps in the slot. So, he might be their go-to.
It's
But
gonna be it's
Carlton
gonna
Da
be wild.
Carlton Davis will shadow. So if there are times when
Right.
the wide receiver 1 goes in the slot, you could certainly see him there, and he'll technically, like, get a slot snap, but he's not a
Yeah.
slot corner. He's
Right.
just that shutdown outside guy.
I hope Zion can figure it out, man. He's so physically gifted.
Yeah, he is. He really is.
Back when I didn't want the Bucks to win, I was so mad when you guys drafted him.
Now you don't care because if they
No,
win,
I
it won't
don't
really
care.
matter.
All right. Last question here
Yep.
is Devin White. Do you think for sure gone after this year? Gone during the year? What do you think happens here?
I still lean that Devin White's going to be a Buck long term. Jason Light loves him, right? I mean, they draft him number 5 overall for a reason. Todd Bowles loves him as well. I think that Todd Bowles has defended Devin White many times when people have brought up the criticism of low PFF grades or ability in coverage or just whatever it is. And Bowles continuously defends Devin White and puts him in situations where he is a starting linebacker to prove himself in all facets of the game. So I think this team really likes him, and I think that they believe that he is a part of their long-term plans. Now, I also am not sure that he's going to go anywhere because outside of Devin White really putting his foot down and in a way that I feel like he would kind of shoot himself in the foot. Like if he were to say, I'm not playing this year. Maybe I should take that back. Guys in this league should get as much money as they possibly can for as long as they're in the league. They're not in the league very long, especially when you play positions like running back and linebacker and trenches. Like you're getting beat up every single snap. Every snap could be your last. And that's so true for players, especially the ones who get in these mini car crashes, if you will, every single play. And linebacker is one of them, especially the way that Devin White plays. So I think that Devin White is fully within his right to do what he believes is right, to leverage himself, to get paid as much as he can to play this game. If he sits out this entire year upcoming, I still don't think that Tampa is going to trade him because think about what they would get back for him. Roquan gets traded last year, and the team that was trading for Roquan, the Baltimore Ravens, knew that they were trading draft assets for him and then had to pay him. So that's always the dangerous part. Trading for guys and paying for guys. Roquan netted a 2nd and a 5th round pick as well as that $100 million contract. Devin White saying that he wants a $100 million contract. I don't think anybody out there is really paying him a $100 million contract. I don't think that that's going to happen. But let's say it's like 80, 85. I don't know what the last number is going to be. Some team would have to then trade draft assets for him and then sign under that massive deal. He ain't getting what Roquan Smith netted. He's probably only going to net, what, a 3rd or a 4th round pick? And the thing with Tampa is they can just take this all the way to free agency because if they let him walk, they're going to get a 3rd or a 4th round comp pick for him anyways because of the size of the contract that he's going to sign. So it's as much as Devin White is demanding this and people are talking about potential destinations, I still feel the most likely result is he's going to get a contract at some point with the Buccaneers, either before the season starts or during free agency, unless he just is really spited by Tampa or has spite for Tampa because they wouldn't give him the $100 million deal. So everything is still in play, but I do still think that Tampa really does not want to lose him. And so I think that he'll probably be a Buck long term.
Okay, that's a good perspective because I think he's gone, but we'll see how it plays out.
Honestly,
but you would know better than me, so that's why you're here.
Honestly, they like him a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Unless what has happened over the last whatever it is 6-8 months with contracts coming up has really soured their relationship. Bowles has stood up for him so much. Jason prioritized him in the draft. Jason's really been an advocate for him. So I think that those things definitely matter when it comes to moving on from a player, not the relationship part of it. And as far as I know, the relationship is still strong. Devin's just trying to get as much money as he possibly can. So we'll see if it comes to fruition or not.
Absolutely. Go get your bag. All right, Trevor. Thank you so much for the time. That's all we've got here for the deep dive. Do you have anything you want to let the people know about before we head out?
No, I mean, you shouted it out. Just the NFL Stock Exchange podcast with myself and Connor Rogers. If anybody out there loves draft work, which obviously if they follow you, they follow some great draft work because you're a big draft guy in draft season as well. But yeah, I mean, we're talking draft all year long. So if you're into that thing, after you watch and listen to Marcus's podcast, come over and listen to the NFL Stock Exchange show.
All right. Peace out, Trevor. Peace out, everybody. Thank you for watching.